Hello friends, this is Dr. Aditya Gupta from University of Delhi. Today we are going to discuss the context principle of meaning in Mimamsa with a special reference to Prabhakar. The contribution of Mimamsa to the philosophy of language is unique and immense. That is why it is often called Bhakya Shastra, or a methodology which investigates into the nature of logic of language. This analytical characteristic is dominant throughout the system because this shows the right path to truth and also makes us realize the same. On the other hand, it is said, if in the pursuit of truth this methodology is not known or insufficiently known, the truth will never be realized. Mīmāmsā method of interpreting scriptures is imitated by other philosophical systems of India, so much so that after Kumarila, the Advaita Vedanta epistemology is known as an exponent of Mīmāmsā only. Further, Mīmāmsā is primarily concerned with the interpretation of the Vedic sentence, that too mainly the action-oriented and ritualistic passages of Vedas. Its conviction is that the underlying principle of the universe is activity, which creates a unitary force to maintain the universe with all its diversity in the form we see it today. This force, for all practical purpose, is a substitute for any intelligent controlling agent like God. This is the reason why Mīmāmsā professes the philosophy of action, an action which must be ethical in nature. Now let us discuss certain basic assumptions of Mīmāmsā first. The understanding of the following assumptions or presuppositions of Mīmāmsā are prerequisite of underlying its theory of meaning. The first and most important assumption is the Vedas are atemporal, nitya and impersonal apaurushaya in composition. Language, of course Sanskrit, is beginningless and prior to any convention. The structure of language corresponds with the structure of the world, that is, we can know the properties of the world from the properties of language. Other is, the basic elements of the world are constituents in direct opposition to the Buddhist, for whom the basic elements are occurrences for or events. The conventional language or words, that is modern coined words, are permutation and combinations which are non-eternal of eternal letters, words and sounds. Since ethical action is the only thing to do for men, language is considered the best and the most effective means of provoking and motivating men to perform ethical actions. Kriyarth. Although language or sentence in any mood do this job directly or indirectly, the imperative or injunctive sentences prove to be the most effective and bring the desired results more simply. The relation between word and its meaning is eternal and beginningless. This is recognized by the fact that our elders have been using them from time immemorial. One has to learn at least once the meaning of a word. The Vedic sentences have significance in the sense that they possess dharma, that is, they are action oriented. In this sense, a sentence has meaning and truth value, but the conventional sentence may be either true or false. For Mīmāmsā, pragmatics also is a part of semantics. The latter is dependent on the former to be determined. Since linguistic or a speech act is possible only by means of sentences, and since only sentences can provoke and motivate a person to perform ethical actions, sentence is the unit of language or a speech. These are certain presumptions we should keep in mind. Now, let us discuss language learning in the context. Language learning or vyutpatti is at two stages, one for kids to whom language is introduced first time and the other for adults. Prabhakara gives the account of language learning situation as follows. A child learns the meaning of words by the method of inclusion, avapa, anvaya, pratisthapana, and elimination means udvapa, vyatirek and visthapana. In linguistic uses of the sentence by one person followed by physical behavior by another. His learning becomes easier when sentences are in imperative mood because they prove to be the most effective means for this purpose. From the utterance of an imperative sentence such as bring a cow and the subsequent fulfillment of obedience conditions pravatti and again the utterance of another imperative sentence, bring a horse, and the subsequent fulfillment of obedience conditions, a child learns the meaning of words cow, horse, and bring by the method of elimination of the word cow from the first sentence and inclusion of another word horse in the second sentence. In other words, when a child who is neutral watches an elder person who is Prayojak Vradha or Uttam Vradha, one who gives command, giving commands to another elder person who is Prayojya Vradha or Madhyama Vradha, one who obeys the command as above, and when the same process is repeated again and again in the case of other similar commands, he learns the meanings of the words that occur in the uttered sentences through the method of elimination and inclusion of words concerned. This process of learning is unconscious and natural. Prabhakara would say that we can talk of general word meaning in isolation where the sentential context is inexplicit, but a word gets its specific and actual meaning and is infused with designative power only in the context of a sentence in which it occurs. For Mimamsa, empirical world is the basic ground of truth conditions on the basis of which the construction of sentences are done. In other words, the structure of language in general coincides with the structure of the world. Empirical sentences, of course meaningful, in any mood contains object word which have their corresponding counterparts for whom they stand. In ultimate analysis, each word in its atomic form refers to a fact, a state of affairs. That is how our understanding of a sentence, irrespective of its mood, is possible. The meaning of a sentence is understandable when it determines its truth conditions. This characteristics of a sentence is obvious in indicative sentences. In other types of sentences, such as in an interrogative sentence, the indicative sentence with the same content is the source of its understanding. For example, the understanding of an interrogative sentence, is there a table in the room, is possible on the understanding of its indicative form, there is a table in the room. Even in non-empirical sentences such as God is omnipotent, which is true or false or meaningless in different senses, the characteristics of God being omnipotent is an extension of human potency observed in the empirical world to its extremity. God is required as an explanatory presuppositions to explain the cause of the world. This again is based on the empirical observation of men in the role of an agent in producing certain effects. In understanding all this, concerned background assumptions or context are necessary conditions. The complete and proper understanding of meaning of a sentence is confirmed when it determines its truth conditions under which it is true or false, or when it has its application in a set of context or background assumptions, explicit as well as inexplicit as the case may be. To understand an uttered or written sentence, it is necessary that the hearer or the reader has semantic competence and the linguistic habits of the speaker or the writer on the one hand, and that of the hearer or the reader on the other hand are similar. These two are prerequisites for understanding sentential meaning. Whether it is literal, ironical, metaphorical, conventional implications or indirect speech acts, Searle thinks that except literal meanings, other sort of meanings are not the properties of sentences at all, but rather of speakers' utterance of sentences. Here we understand this is not the case. Any sort of meaning which is language to convey it to others in public has objectivity in this sense. Therefore, literal meaning as well as other sort of meanings are very much properties of sentence. Had the latter been exclusive properties of the speakers, they would not have got communicability because of their subjective nature. Let us discuss intention and semantic ambiguity. In case of such semantic notions as ambiguity and metaphor, the intention of the speaker tatparya in particular, and other explicit as well as inexplicit background assumptions in addition to the literal meaning have to be taken into account for the proper understanding of an expression. Intention or tatparya in a broader sense is not only the intention of the speaker, it may be an intention in the form of a demand of a word in order to complete the sentence in which it occurs. Anything which is intended, such as explicit or inexplicit, context, background assumptions, demand of an incomplete expression to be completed, and volitional attitude or state of the speaker is covered by intention or tatparya. In this sense, a sentence differs from a so-called independent word used in isolation. The meaning of a sentence is determined by the meaning of the component words contained in it. When we are asked to explain the meaning of one of its words, the sentential context becomes necessary. We will have to take the whole meaning of the sentence which determines the meaning of a word contained in it. First, it is simply a word in a sentence under consideration, but taken in relation to other component words and the meaning of a sentence, it gets its actual meaning in that sentential context. Let us consider the following factual points. 1. There is a thought. Second, the words are combined following grammatical and syntactical rules to form a sentence in accordance of a set of given context for the purpose of expression of that thought. Third, by means of implication or lakshana, there arises the whole meaning of the sentence which determines its truth conditions. And fourth, if needed, we extract the specific meaning of a word which is determined by the context of a sentence. These are the points which are taken care of by Prabhakara in his thesis that sentence is the unit of language, speech or significance, and its meaning is nothing but relatedness of the component words, of course grammatically, syntactically and semantically and contextually. Padanam anvayo vakyartham, which means the question of word meaning arises only after a word has entered into the context of a sentence. This explains the reason as to why Prabhakara maintains, unlike Frege in West, that the sentence's meaning is determined by component words rather than by their meanings. Prabhakara will agree with Frege that so far as the question of the recognition of the meaning of a word is concerned, in order it is prior to the comprehension of the sentence meaning, but only recognition of the meaning of the component word on the basis of previous knowledge and their aggregate is not sufficient to account for the sentence meaning. The reason is that in earlier sentential contexts, a word was endowed with various meanings. This is the ground of various meanings of a word recorded in a dictionary. A word in a particular sentential context has a particular meaning which is its actual meaning in the given context. A meaning of a word is determined by the truth conditions of the sentence and the relation it has with other words in that sentence. In the case of Prabhakara, for achieving the ultimate good, only the imperative sentences are to be considered genuine sentences. That is, only such sentences have significance, for they provoke and motivate a person to perform ethical actions. An imperative sentence is significant when it determines its obedience conditions, whereas an indicative sentence is significant when it determines its truth conditions in the physical phenomena. The imperative sentence of Mimamsa should be interpreted in the light of its belief in the Vedic prescriptions meant for making the life happiest here and hereafter. Now, let us discuss the unit of language. As to the unit of language, thus according to Prabhakara, there should be no problem in accepting sentence as a primary unit of language and speech and significance. But since a word also can be used as a unit of meaning, although invariably and necessarily its meaning is determined by a sentential context in the sense discussed above, it is also a secondary unit of language. In understanding the significance of a sentence, a set of truth conditions, pravatti nimitta, which determine its meaning, has to be taken into consideration. For Prabhakara and Mimamsa in general, Since language is eternal and coincides with reality, which is also eternal, we can reach reality via language. Consequently, we can say that the sentence determines its own truth conditions. Further, we find that in the construction of new sentences, syntactical rules are followed step by step, and the individual meaning of its component words in that context are taken into account. This means that the meaning of a component words of a sentence determine its truth conditions or significance, which is in the form of a whole or unitary form. But this does not confuse with the Nyaya or Kumaril's thesis that words have independent meanings, because even if the words and their meanings are recognized first and used in construction of a new sentences, it is undeniable that originally words have got their meanings in some sentential context or other in the past. The so-called popular or independent meaning of a word may be altered when the word is used in a new sentence. Sometimes the independent meaning of a word is interpreted in a totally radical sense, which is determined by unusual or inexplicitly contexts or background assumptions. For example, the word table popularly means a particular object for which it stands in the external worlds. But in certain context, it is nothing but a logical fiction, a totally different meaning from the usual one. This shows that the meaning of a word is necessarily and invariably determined by a set of contexts in which it has its application, but not necessarily in other contexts. A word in isolation, that is a context-free word, does not provoke and motivate a person for action. On the other hand, it is only by means of a sentence that a linguistic act is performed, which in turn provokes and motivates a person to perform an action. In other words, the meaning of a sentence or an expression is identified with its use. This is the way in which semantic, that is the understanding or analysis of a sentence, determines the pragmatics, the effect of utterance on the hearer. This is the situation with adults who possess semantic competence and are logically trained hearers. But at the early stage of learning a language, as in the case of a child or a foreigner, pragmatics determines semantics. In this situation, the truth conditions of a sentence are demonstrated through physical behavior first, and then the significance of a sentence or the meaning of a word is understood. This is best illustrated when an imperative sentence is uttered and followed up action is performed. More precisely, the linguistic act of one person, prayojak vradha, bring a cow, and the physical fulfillment of obedience condition by another person, or prayojya vradha, when he goes and brings a cow, and such other case create a learning situation for a child, that is, who is a third person tatastha, in which he understands the significance of the uttered word sentence. Vradha vyavhare rutho, and such other cases create a learning situation for a child who is tatastha, in which he understands the significance of a uttered sentence like Vradha vyavharertho vagammite. In the case of an indicative sentence, the truth of its significance is known when the expected truth conditions of the sentence coincide with the description of the fact it gives. Now, let us discuss the significance of sentence. For Mīmāmsā, each Vedic sentence possesses Dharma, whose chief characteristic is to provoke and motivate a person to perform ethical action. Chodanarth Lakshado Dharma. This is the universality of the Vedic sentences, and in this sense they are significant. Instigative characteristic Chodana of a sentence is its real significance, Vakyartha, such as in the case of an indicative sentence, which is basically supposed to instigate a person to perform certain action, although by implication it also indicates a fact or gives the description of it or expresses the speaker's intentionality. A Vedic sentence in Mimamsa is always true, and a true sentence indicates a fact. In this sense, Dharma is a fact, but here we are mainly concerned with those conventional sentences which are either true or false or meaningless. The question, what makes a sentence significant or meaningful? Prabhakara will say that a sentence is significant if it provokes and motivates a person to perform an ethical action or to refrain from prohibited action, vidhi and nishedha respectively. These are the two contradictory effects on the hearer or the reader. In Mimamsa, two psychological factors are taken into account while identifying the meaning of an injunctive sentence. One, causes for the utterance of a sentence, namely the purpose of instigating a person to perform an ethical action or not to perform a prohibited action. This refers to the intention of a speaker. And second, its effect on the hearer in two stages. First stage, there arises an urge in his mind whether to perform or not to perform a certain action, and second, if inclined, he performs the action. The significance of a conventional indicative sentence is identified by its truth conditions or by its application in a set of context, explicit as well as inexplicit. If applicable, then true, and if not applicable, then false. Now, let us discuss the intention part of a meaning. Those who think that intention is not the part of meaning are unable to deal with such semantic notion as ambiguity, metaphor, irony and conventional implications. If we do not understand the intention of a speaker's utterance, how can we understand its meaning he or she wants to convey to the hearer? This goes against the primary function of language, that is communicability. It is not justified to say, unlike Frege, that the feeling evoked by a speaker's utterance in the hearer is irrelevant. Suppose the hearer's feeling are evoked by a speaker's utterance, but if this was not the intention of the speaker, the question is whether this kind of effect on the hearer is the part of that meaning of utterance or not. It is to be noted that so far as the meaning of utterance is concerned, only the states of a speaker are taken into consideration by Western thinkers, whereas classical Indian thinkers also take the hearer's understanding of the same. Nayayikas and the Advaita Vedantins attach great importance to the intention of the speaker in understanding the meaning of his utterance. If we take the intention of a speaker as a part of meaning, the sentence meaning will be what the speaker desires to convey to the hearer by the sentence uttered by him. Since Prabhakara is considering context as a necessary factor in getting the meaning of a word or a sentence, he would not hesitate to include intention in context and other background assumptions as well. This is the case with conventional or empirical propositions only. With regard to Vedic sentences, the Mīmāmsakas will not bring in the intention of the speaker as he is not the original source of Vedic sentences. The significance of a sentence is ascertained not only when its linguistic use is followed by physical act, but also when the sentence is applicable to the empirical world, which provides the truth conditions for its significance without breaking the connections between that sentence and the perception. And it is on such connections that the meaning of the sentence depends. Vachaspati, a follower of Kumarila, says that every utterance of a significant sentence shows the intention of the speaker that he desires to convey his thought to the hearer. But how to know the intention of his expression? The only way to know it is to take the present context and background assumptions and make an inference of his intentionality therefrom, so that any ambiguity in identifying the meaning of his expression is avoided. Sometimes a speaker utters something but intends to convey something else. What he intends in this case is conveyed through the conventional implications of what he utters. When his intended meaning is conveyed to the hearer, his purpose is served, which is also the purpose of language. Take for example a case where V is possessing a pen without knowing that it actually belongs to A, who wants his pen back but does not want to embarrass B by straightway asking him to return it. So he uses an indirect method and says, "Sir, this pen is mine." If B understands by it merely a statement of fact, which is its literal meaning, he won't return it. But he does return it to A by understanding A's intention and the present context in which this linguistic act is performed. Therefore, the speaker's utterance, at least in this example, should not be taken literally, that is, as a statement of fact. A perfect situation, which may be an ideal one, of identifying meaning of an utterance of a sentence arises only when the so-called literal meaning, that is the speaker's meaning, and the understanding of these two by the hearer coincide with each other. Now, it is the hearer who identifies the meaning of an utterance, keeping in view the contextual factors as well as the syntactical factors. That is why the hearer is required to be logically trained or an ideal hearer, that is, he must possess linguistic as well as semantic competence. Now, let us discuss the construction of sentence. Let us consider the two questions. First is how to construct a significant sentence. In other words, what are the necessary and sufficient conditions? Syntactics as well as syntactic, which are to be fulfilled while constructing a significant sentence. And the second question is, how do we identify or comprehend the meaning of a sentence or an expression? In other words, what is the process of comprehending the sentence meaning? There is almost a consensus among classical Indian thinkers with regard to the requirements or factors, conditions which lead to the formation of a significant sentence. These conditions apply to each word contained in the sentence. They are: first is akanksha or syntactical mutual expectancy of words to be combined in a complete sentence and exclusion of those which are not required. This is the most fundamental requirement of all. For example, if one utters in a normal way a word bring, he is not making an assertion. The word requires other words such as pen, book or cow to complete the sentence. This requirement is felt by the hearer, but metaphorically it is said that a word has syntactic expectancy. The other two requirements are subservient to it. Second requirement is sanniti, that is sufficiently close contiguity of phonetic elements, that is letters in the case of word and words in the case of a sentence. While uttering a word or a sentence, morphological contiguity while writing a word or a sentence, and syntactical contiguity while writing in constructing a sentence. In other words, there should not be unwanted temporal gaps in uttering the syllables of a word and the words of a sentence. Similarly, there should not be unwanted spatial gaps in writing them. Third condition is yogyata. This is the requirement of semantic consistency and coherence of one word with other words to be combined in uttering or writing a significant sentence. A sentence might have been syntactically formed, but it is not necessary that it will be a semantically significant sentence as well. Take for example a sentence, virtue is a triangle, or another sentence in Sanskrit, vahanina sinchati, that is, he sprinkles with fire. These sentences obviously lack semantic consistency in the sense that they fail to determine their truth conditions or fail to refer to their truth values. This inconsistency is because of the choice of mutually unsuitable words. A sentence is meaningless in this sense. Later on, A fourth requirement, tatparya, was added in order to avoid any semantic ambiguity in identifying the meaning of a sentence or an expression. This is more a requirement of understanding or semantic analysis of the meaning of a sentence. Semantic notions such as ambiguity, metaphor, irony, and conventional implications involved in a sentence are dealt with only when intention or tatparya is understood in comprehensive sense, which includes the intentionality of the speaker, contextual situations, and other background assumptions. Thus, the construction of a significant sentence requires the systems of phonology, morphology, syntax, and semantics as necessary and sufficient conditions. Now, let us discuss identification of sentence meaning. As to the question of process of identifying or comprehending the meaning of a sentence, there are various rival theories. 4 of them are important for us. First is theory of contextual significance, Anvita Vidhanavad of Prabhakar. Second is theory of compositional significance, Avhitanvayavad of Kumaril. Third is theory of contextual compositional significance, Anvita Vidhan Avhitanvayavad of Nyaya. And fourth, the theory of sentence as an impartite whole, Akhand Vakyavad of Vartahari. The difference between these theories is because of the difference in their basic assumptions. Before we discuss the process of identifying the meaning of a sentence, it is important to know whether a metaphysical relation is required to bring one, the words into relationship with each other in the sentence in which they occur. Second, the meaning of a constituent words into relationship with the sentence meaning. Another equally important question is whether language learning or linguistic uses are through sentence or through words. Here we would like to say at the very outset that if pressed hard, every theory will be reduced to the theory of contextual significance, Anvita Vidhanavad. Let us take theories of Prabhakar and Kumaril one by one here. Prabhakar maintains that since our language learning and linguistic use is possible only by means of sentence, Vakyarthena Vyavharaha, the sentence is the primary unit of language. A word is never seen in linguistic use in isolation, that is, independent of context. When a word is said to have a meaning or a designatum, it should not be understood as standing for a context. Free individual fact. Take the word table, its designatum, the object table, is understood only in respect of its substance, attribute, and the relation the two hold between them and with other such things in their physical context. On explanation, we find that the word table is understood in the context of a sentence at least. In our linguistic use, we never recognize a word in isolation without its explanation with respect to some context in which it is treated as an elliptical form of an organically whole sentence. A word is infused with its designative power, Vachaka Shakti, only in its linguistic use in the context of a sentence. A significant sentence is constructed by its constituent words following syntactic and semantic rules discussed above. These rules also bring to meaning of a word into mutual relationship or anvay, giving rise to the sentence meaning Padarth ev Vakyartha. A word's general or literal meaning may not remain the same, and sometimes it is altered substantially or even radically when the word is used in a new context. The earlier meaning, that is general or popular or literal meaning, is significant only for the recognition of the word so that it can be used or understood prima facie in a given context and can help determine its own specific or vishesha meaning in that context. The sentence meaning as an organic whole with the help of general meaning of a word contained in it determines its specific meaning. Since in constructing or understanding a new sentence, the general meaning of a constituent words are not taken as such, and since the words get their fresh or specific meanings after they are combined in a context of a new sentence, it is said by Prabhakara's commentators that the sentence meaning is determined by its constituent words themselves, not by their meanings. However, this does not mean that the word has two or more meanings at the same time, that is, in the same context. In the final analysis, that is, in the semantic analysis of sentence, the general meanings of its constituent words are proved to be superfluous and hence left behind after the words get their specific meanings in the new context. Further, according to Prabhakara, the significance of a sentence is determined when its constituent words are related syntactically and semantically to each other, and when the sentence is applicable to a set of contextual situation and other background assumptions. That is why his theory is called the theory of contextual significance or Anvita Vidhanvad, where Anvay, from which Anvit is formed, means syntactic and semantic juxtaposition, not a metaphysical relation as understood by Kumaril and Nyaya in their Avihitanvavad. Literally, Anvita Vidhanvad means the theory of expression of what are related. His conception of the unitary meaning of a sentence is based on the principle of synthesis, that is Anvay, which is understood by implication or lakshana, as well as on context principle as discussed above. Kumarila and his followers differ from Prabhakara in many respects, but they agree with the latter so far as the learning of a meaning or use of a word by means of a sentence is concerned. Thereafter, they maintain a word can be used in isolation, that is, independently of any context. Kumarila's theory of process of comprehending sentence meaning is based on the composition principle, samsarga. He follows the model of forest, vana, which is nothing but an aggregate of individual trees. In the construction of a sentence, the constituent words are ordered following syntactical and semantic rules, which constitute the ground for bringing them into mutual relationship. The unitary meaning Vishishtartha of the sentence is identified by the implication or Lakshanarthapatti after the meaning of the word are combined. Kumaril, like Prabhakara but unlike Nyaya, does not accept any metaphysical category of relation, that is samvaya, to bring the word meanings into relationship. But one thing is very clear, that Kumaril partially accepts the context principle of Prabhakara when he talks of language learning by means of sentence, that is, in the context of a sentence followed by physical act. Further, since the significance of a sentence, Vishishtartha, according to Kumaril, is identified through the composition of the constituent words, his theory is called the theory of compositional significance, Avihitanvevad. That is, literally it means the theory of relation of what are expressed. Both Kumaril and Prabhakar would agree with Savara that the significance of a sentence refers to its truth value. When it is true, it determines its truth conditions under which it is true. In that case, a sentence designates an existing state of affair. Again, the truth of a sentence is ascertained when its structure coincides with the structure of the fact it designates, which are grasped in the qualificative cognition, that is, when the sentence and the perception of its designation coincides. An object word denotes that the individuals of a class. In this sense, it has universal designative power, samanya vritti, but this power is delimited to an individual when used in the context of a sentence which designates or describes an existing state of affairs, Vishesha Vritti. This is the general view to which Kumaril, Prabhakar, Nyaya, Vedantins, Bhartari and others also will subscribe. Prabhakar's thesis is applicable here also, that a word, despite its general meaning, Samanya Vritti, is endowed with its specific meaning, Vishesha Vritti, when it occurs in the context of a sentence. This shows that so far as the meaning of a word is concerned, every philosophical school of thinker will accept Prabhakara's context principle of meaning in some form or other. At the level of construction, a sentence in Kumarila is the composition of words whose meanings are already designated before they are combined in the sentence. This is Avihitanvayavad. But at the level of comprehension of sentence meaning, which is unitary in nature, he will of course admit that the expression of sentence meaning becomes possible only after constituent words are related by syntactical and semantic roles. This is obviously Anvita Vidhanvad. The same conclusion can be deduced from his discussion of the formation of a word which has a unitary meaning from the composition of syllables, Varna. The main difference between Kumaril and Prabhakar on this issue is what is primary meaning, Avidha, for one is secondary meaning for the other and vice versa. Thus, we find the main difference between Kumaril and Prabhakar on this issue is what is primary meaning for one is secondary meaning for the other and vice versa. This is Prabhakara's view on language. Thank you very much.